Andrews joining us now, best bookshelf in television. I'm just going to say it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Malika, the Nets host the Blazers tonight. As you know, Kyrie Irving will return to the lineup after missing last night's game, and Kevin Durant is now going to sit on the back-to-back. We still have no idea when James Harden is going to return. What have you noticed, Malika, about how Steve Nash has managed this revolving door lineup?
Well, Rachel, right now they're kind of having no choice but to embrace it. When I talk to Steve Nash about what it has been like, he says over and over again that we have just come to embrace the unexpected because that has been the story of their season all year long. And he actually talked about it ahead of the Pacers game and mentioned something that he said put everything into perspective for him. And that was Karis LeVert being diagnosed with cancer. Now, obviously, he is okay. It was a mass that they were able to remove. He is playing again. We're all thankful for that. But he actually said that even though he only was able to coach Karis for a short amount of time, that was something that was really impactful because in the grand scheme of things, he said that he was a little bit frustrated. What keeps him up at night is knowing how many minutes, the backlog of minutes that other players have had to pick up in the absence of a Kevin Durant, a James Harden, other people like that. But that is what he was thinking about, Rachel.
You know, Rachel, obviously, anyone who covered Steve Nash as a player probably realized he's as good a fit as there is to coach a team just because of his demeanor, right? Like, just he was a coach on the floor in many ways when he was with the Phoenix Suns. So there was an expectation that he'd be good at this. But he's exceeded those expectations because of everything Malika just outlined and what you outlined, which is this thing has been chaotic in a lot of ways, and it hasn't felt that way or as much. It hasn't felt as chaotic because of Steve Nash being so grounded, being able to kind of manage things, and getting the best out of those guys on that roster that are not named Durant, Harden, and Irving.
Yeah, and look, his relationship with Kevin, I was thinking the other day just about how the Warriors days you would see after practice, right? Do you remember this, George? You would see that just Steve and Kevin working on the floor, having some of those shooting contests and things like that. I think that also carries through in this situation. Malika, when you have to have people in and out and this and that, do you think him having a shorthand with Kevin, a shorthand relationship with some of the other guys that he's been at events with over recent years, has that helped him too?
Yeah, and also experience, Rachel. I absolutely think that you're right. That has helped, and that's an astute observation. But I also think that Steve Nash has said sort of over the course of the year, he has grown and learned sort of how to be a coach, to take a little bit more authority, to figure out how to blend the I was a player and I know what you all are going through with also being now the authoritative figure. And that's something that came with time and with reps. But now at this point in the season, they're hitting sort of the right stride of those two things. Steve Nash has talked about the fact that he thinks he has figured out how to sort of protect these players from themselves, even in cases where Kevin Durant told me last night he wanted to play in this back-to-back. He thought maybe he lost some bargaining chips having to go back in the fourth quarter when their lead shrunk a little bit. Those sorts of decisions that Steve Nash is now making and making them with authority, that's also giving him sort of a leg up and making him kind of realize some of the moves that he has to make as a coach that potentially he hasn't had to make in the past, even though he's been around these players, and that's shaken out recently.
And let's not undersell the staff that he built, okay, that has a ton of experience, including specifically Mike D'Antoni, his old coach, right? Because I know that everyone likes to look at Mike D'Antoni and say, oh, he never won the big one. But, man, I don't know if there's a coach that came any closer to winning the big one or getting to the big one than Mike D'Antoni has. And I remember specifically when LeBron, Wade, and Bosh won their first championship, Rachel, Eric Spoelstra called Mike D'Antoni to tell him, hey, your style won, okay? So you need to take some solace in that. And I do think that we should recognize Mike D'Antoni being a part of this as well.
Yeah, that positionless basketball, right? Everything that he pushed. And I think the players on the team now, even if they didn't, I mean, guys are young now. Not everybody knows some of Mike's early work. But even if they didn't see it firsthand, they know that he's responsible for this evolution in the game, and that makes his voice a little bit louder. I remember at the beginning of the season, Steve was talking about how I was just trying to control everything and do it perfect and do it right. And he said it was about 2 weeks then that he realized that's not going to happen this season. So I should just surrender to the chaos.
Forever.
That strategy has really, really helped him. I want to get back to LeBron James. We talked about it with Woj at the top of the show. He's been upgraded from out to questionable for tonight against the Kings. LeBron has been out since March 20th, guys, with that high ankle sprain. It's the longest absence of his career. So, George, what changes for the Lakers with LeBron back in the lineup? Even when he's just working his way back in, what can he pick up and help them?
Again, if we were playing something, nothing, or everything, everything. This would be everything,
This is
Rachel.
everything.
Okay. Look, they've been the second worst offensive rating team in the NBA in his absence. Okay, in 20 or 21 games, whatever it's been, they've been really bad on offense. Okay, even with Anthony Davis back, they've been a little better, but not as good as LeBron James. He is the engine here, certainly. So right there, that fixes a lot of problems. And then look, defensively, they've been good, but they have slipped a little bit. They went from being the best defense in the NBA to being the second best defense in the NBA to fourth. So there's been some slippage. And with LeBron back in the lineup and obviously AD, they could go back to being the top defense in the NBA as well.
Well, and what this affords, George, and you know this as well, Rachel, is that what the Nets are lacking right now, in some cases, is just definition of what is going to happen. There is so much unknown. And so when you have Andre Drummond having signed with the Lakers while LeBron James was not playing, you were able to see him and Anthony Davis a little bit, but then you add LeBron into the mix, and it's a question of, okay, how is that going to work exactly? Anthony Davis has talked about the fact that he enjoys playing the four. So when LeBron comes back, what shifts there? Is it still going to be Drummond playing the five? I know Anthony Davis has talked about how he envisions it being a little bit like DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, Lob City Clippers. Those roles get to be solidified. They get to be refined. Even if LeBron James is on some sort of minutes restriction, all of those things they get to see, they get to work through, even with a couple of games back. And that's an advantage over a team that a lot of people think could be pushing them, and that is the Nets.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just lets people play their regular roles, right? Andre Drummond's role on this team is going to be different if LeBron James and Anthony Davis are in the lineup, and that's what they intend to have during the playoffs. So it will let him finally, for the first time since he's been here in Los Angeles, know what that role is and work through it. George, we did see AD and AD, as we've been calling them here, kind of have a lot of conversations over the first few games, who does what. We know that AD, of course, prefers to play the four so he doesn't get beat up all season, but that Frank is going to slip him into that five spot when he needs to. Second halves of playoff games, we've seen all kinds of things, and Anthony has been great about saying, that's fine, I get it. What do you see as sort of LeBron, Anthony Davis, Andre Drummond, all of that shaking out, George, as they chart this path for the playoffs?
So I think LeBron obviously just puts people in their roles, as Malika talked about. Like, I think Andre Drummond's offensive game, which has been pretty good, will be even better with someone like LeBron. Look, you give LeBron anyone that can roll to the rim, and it's going to be magic, right? Like, there's no doubt. But specifically with Andre Drummond and Anthony Davis, I'm curious to see how LeBron helps them defensively, right? LeBron is certainly going to help. I don't think there's any question about that. But it is small sample size theater here. 83 minutes with AD and AD, and it's a minus 12.6 net rating, okay? A 106 offensive rating, a 119 defensive rating. And I think that we saw this a little last year with Dwight Howard, where there were matchups where he could be played off the floor. But the difference here, Rachel and Malika, is this. Frank Vogel has talked about Andre Drummond being someone that will play starters